My name is Hannah Borchik, and I am the Customer Success Manager here at Binary Fountain. And I also previously built a listings management strategy for a national healthcare organization. I will be moderating today's webinar today. So for the next 30 minutes, we'll be talking about key elements of Google and Google My Business that are worth your attention this year. I am joined by a couple of all-stars in the world of SEO and Google My Business. Joy Hawkins from Sterling Sky and Emma Cook from Gene B. Glick Company. I'll let you all introduce yourselves. So let's start with you, Joy.
All right, thanks for having me here. So I run a local SEO agency that's based in Canada and the US. So we do anything to do with local search for small businesses in the US and Canada. And we also run a forum called the Local Search Forum, which is a free forum where people can kind of go on and ask any questions they want or things pertaining to local search or Google My Business.
Thanks, Joy and Emma.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Emma Cook, and I'm a digital media manager with the Gene B. Glick Company. Glick is headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana, and is one of the largest privately held real estate management and development firms in the country. We own and operate just over 100 multifamily communities across the U.S., and I work on the marketing team that manages all the websites and the reputation management and the local listings as well.
Great. Thank you guys so much for joining today. We are really excited to get your insights. So before we begin, let's take a quick look at what to expect today. So first, we will briefly cover the growing importance of Google search and Google My Business. Then we will dive into some questions about optimizing your Google My Business profile and how best to use its features. And then we'll talk about ongoing management and how to get the most out of your listings. And finally, if there is time, we'll give you all some takeaways and a Q&A session. After we're finished, we'll take a few questions from attendees. So to ask a question, please use the chat box on the right side of your webinar window and indicate who you would like to send the question to. So I wanted to start off this webinar by defining what a zero-click search is to help highlight the importance of listing your business on Google My Business. A zero-click search is when a user executes a Google search, but instead of clicking on any of the sites on the results page, they use the information already presented on the search engine results page as a means to answering their query. So here's what we are currently seeing. Over 50% of searches result in a zero-click search. This means having your information listed on Google My Business, in addition to your business website, is essential to your search strategy. These stats can obviously change by industry and depending on your organizational business objectives. They can also change based on what you're seeing from your type of Google searcher. In my personal experience in the healthcare industry and with my current client, I can agree with the stat that most people in their initial search are finding what they need on a Google listing, not really needing to go any further. However, I am going to pass it over to Joy and then to Emma to share what they are seeing by industry. Joy?
Yeah, so Google My Business has definitely been launching a lot of new features in the last couple of years. They are looking to give the user more information directly in the search results. So from behind the scenes at the agency, we still see that your website and your links to your website, all that traditional kind of SEO stuff, is still the main dictator on who ranks higher. But the first impression that someone gets about your business is incredibly important. So Google has been launching a lot of features to try and kind of give you more opportunities to get that first impression. So not knowing what's going on out there on Google or how your listing shows up or what people are seeing is really dangerous. It's imperative to keep a close eye on your Google My Business listing and use all of the new features that Google's been launching so that users can see the messaging and you can have a little more control over it.
Thanks, Joy. And Emma, what are you seeing?
Yeah, in my experience, it kind of just depends on where the person is at in their sales cycle. So someone doing their initial research on an apartment community, they're more likely to fall into that zero-click search traffic bucket, while someone a little bit further along in the sales process, they're likely to end up on our community's website. And I think that's just based on the fact that they can take a lot more action on the website than what's available to them on Google My Business. And in addition to that, deciding on an apartment home is a big decision that's costly that will impact them for months to come. The Google My Business listing is really important, and we kind of operate with the idea that it's an opportunity for us to create awareness and increase exposure, and just share information that will impact our prospects during the research phase. But ultimately, the last call to action would be on our website.
Thank you both. So let's get to our first question on specific attributes that we should keep track of. So after claiming my Google My Business profile, what are the first attributes and data points that I would need to fill in? Joy, I'm going to pass this question to you.
Yeah, so I'd say the number one thing, the most important thing that matters is the categories you pick. So making sure that you have the right category as your first one, your primary category, and then also making sure that you add additional ones that are relevant. This is one of the main factors that decides on where you rank and where you show up. So that would be like the number one thing that I would look at first.
Thank you, Joy. Moving on to the next question. What are the benefits of a call to action button like schedule an appointment? Emma, I'm going to pass this question to you.
Yeah, so the call to action buttons just provide that direction that some users need. They'll read all the information and then think, now what? So those call to actions just kind of nudge them in the right direction to take action. In my experience, it's best practice to provide the clearest call to action that's available. Something more along the lines of get this offer or sign up versus a more vague call to action like learn more. Those seem to perform better for us.
So Joy, how much does my Google My Business description weigh into search results?
Yeah, so it's not a really high priority item in my opinion. It shows up pretty low in the knowledge panel. So when you search your business name, that long thing on the right-hand side that lists all the information, it's pretty low on the page. So it's not extremely visible and it's not currently factored into ranking. So adding a ton of descriptive keywords in your description doesn't, make your listing rank higher. So I would say in comparison to some of the other features, it's low on the priority list, but still worth doing as it doesn't honestly take that much time to write a good description. So it's worth doing.
And Emma, are you seeing something similar in multifamily?
Yeah, I would agree. It's a low priority. From time to time, I'll see a snippet of a business description pulled into those local free pack results, but more than that impacts the search engines, I think that just provides a better user experience. So I would agree with Joy in that, you should do it, but it's not a huge impact on rankings.
So Joy, back to you. What effects do photos have on my Google My Business profile for both SEO and customer expectations?
Yeah, so I think the answer really varies here based on what type of business you have. So if you're a hotel or a restaurant, for example, having photos is going to be more important than if you were like an insurance agent or a lawyer. So I think the answer here definitely varies based on the industry, but they're more important, I would say, for the user experience. Like if people want to know what your store looks like or what type of food you have on your menu, if you're a restaurant, like photos come into play a lot in those cases. It's not one of those things though, if we have an attorney we're working with, we don't tell them to go add 100 photos on their listing because they're not going to see an impact from that.
Emma, I'm sure that in multifamily, photos are also important. Would you agree?
Yeah, we see the photos that we upload getting thousands of views. So it's a high priority to us. Just providing clear, high resolution imagery whenever possible.
Okay, and for the last question, back to you, Joy. How important is Google questions and answers and anticipating those frequently asked questions?
Yeah, I would say monitoring them is very important. Like if a user goes and posts a question on your listing and then you don't answer it, you have a missed opportunity there. Maybe they will continue to bother you some other way by sending you a message or whatnot, but maybe they won't, they'll just move on. So I think having responses and timely responses is important. One of the kind of issues with that is that because there isn't a questions and answers section yet in the Google My Business dashboard, people sometimes don't even realize that section exists. So that's a bit problematic, but Google does have it where they will email you. You get an alert when someone posts a new question now. So that's helpful, but if you manage more than 100 listings in your account, you don't get email alerts. So you need to set up third-party tools if that's the case.
Thank you. And moving on to the next slide. So it's not that easy to respond to every review that pops up on Google, but how important is it actually that I reply to Google reviews? I'm going to pass this to you, Joy, first.
Yeah, so we recommend always responding to every review. The only ones we skip are ratings without text. So if someone gives you just like 5 stars, but they don't say anything, and we don't usually respond to those because there's nothing to respond to, like they didn't say anything. But the reason why we respond to both positives and negatives is because the user that left the review gets an email alert when you post the response. So that's a really good retention tool to kind of show the customer like, hey, we read your review and we appreciate it. So I would definitely make that a regular business practice.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with you, Joy. In healthcare, however, sometimes it can be more of a gray area. Sometimes reviews you can't actually respond to online without violating patient confidentiality. So we at Binary Fountain are happy to work with you to create a strategy with your business to determine whether to respond online or to take it offline and maybe contact the patient via phone or email. So moving to the next question, should I spend time on Google posts and what makes those worthwhile? Emma, I'm going to pass this to you first.
Yeah, so Google Posts are something that we've just started working into our strategy. So for us, I would say it's a little bit too early to make the call on whether or not it's worthwhile. It's certainly something we're doing and spending time on, but it hasn't really been in place long enough for me to have a strong stance on it yet.
And what about you, Joy?
Yeah, so we definitely do posts. I think, again, this varies based on the business. If you have coupons or sales, those types of things do really well with Google Posts. Or the other thing we found that generally results in conversions is highlighting awards you've won, or essentially whatever your unique selling proposition is, whatever makes you better than your competitors. Using posts to highlight stuff like that is a much better use of a post than making some type of informative post where you're like, read all about this particular topic and informational. They don't tend to do as well because the user is later on their journey by the time they see that post. So you really would just want to use it to sell them, if that makes sense.
Moving on to the next question, Emma, if I have multiple locations, will developing hyper-local content for each location benefit my listing strategy?
Yes, I would absolutely say it benefits your listing. We have a variety of communities and some operate in the same exact area. So I think the more hyperlocal you can get, the better. For us, that means including the name of the area. It might just be a neighborhood name, different than the city, state they're in, but something that really helps signify to the end customer, where you're at and what you're doing.
And another question for you, Emma, is it worth my time to find and appeal or delete duplicate listings? And how do you keep track of them?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely worth your time as well. I have an example of one of our communities. It used to be multiple phases, but we no longer own and operate one of those. And we found that a duplicate listing was sending traffic to our competitors. So there's a handful of them that I have on my list at all times that, even though they'll be corrected, they sometimes flip back to that old format where you kind of have to keep an eye on them and report them and work on getting those removed.
I would absolutely agree with you as well. Having a strategy in your listings management strategy to manually search or work with a vendor to search for those duplicates and remove them is essential. In healthcare, and this is an extreme example, but it is a true example. In my experience, we had a duplicate listing appear on Google, and It was for a hospital, and an ambulance used the address that was on that duplicate listing that was incorrect, and the ambulance ended up driving out to a field instead of to the emergency room. So as you can imagine, it was very important for that information to be taken down or updated to be correct. So moving on to the next slide. Joy, once I filled out my basic information and those key attributes, what additional content will take my Google My Business profile to the next level?
Yeah, so one feature that jumps out at me is the Google Products feature, which is currently in beta. So it's not on every single Google My Business listing, but most of them have it. And I think a lot of people look at it and they think like, okay, I offer services, I don't offer products, so they skip over it. But we actually fill it out for clients, even if they do offer services. Like instead of listing a product, we list like a service they offer, because it shows up really high in the knowledge panel. So it's extremely visible. And it's another opportunity to get some, again, messaging out there that you want the user to see. So it's one I would take advantage of.
Thanks, Joy. Emma, do you have anything to add to this question?
Yeah, I would just echo what Joy said, in that the Google products, we've been using those and have seen a lot of engagement for those. For our industry, I've been using it by uploading an image of a floor plan and all the information, you know, square footage, numbers of beds, bath, the price of the unit, and we see a lot of action on those product posts.
Thank you, guys. Moving on to the next question, Joy, this is for you. What is the best way to track my Google presence on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, so the most basic form I would say is to look inside Google My Business Insights, but specifically in the actions section. So there's like a bunch of different graphs inside Google My Business Insights, and some of them are way more valuable than others. So actions are people that have called or gotten driving directions or clicked to your website. So those are like a lot more valuable metrics to look at. If you want to take it a step further and you're investing in SEO, or you're actually paying money to market your Google My Business listing, I would suggest using call tracking, so you can better monitor the actual calls that are coming in, and you'll have a more accurate number of calls per like unique person.
Thank you. So Emma, back to you. Which factors or attributes will impact my search engine ranking position the most? Does it depend on my industry?
Yeah, so I think, you know, just filling out ensuring the basic information is filled out, your name, address, and phone number. But then I think after that, the most important section would be the categories, making sure that you're being as honest and transparent and filling out as many categories as possible.
And Joy, do you think that this depends on an industry?
Nope, definitely the same. We've seen across any industry, because we work with a bunch of different industries. And the four main things that are the biggest determining factor of rank when it comes to like Google My Business fields you can fill in is your name. So that unfortunately has a lot to do with where you rank. The categories you choose, what URL you link to, so where you are linking the listing to, what page on your website, and the text and number of reviews, Google reviews that you get.
And where do reviews and ratings come into play for SEO rankings and local search, Joy?
So the text of the reviews, like what people are talking about, impacts rank, but then as well, like there is a volume thing. So generally speaking, when you get more reviews, that'll likely impact your click-through rate. So, you know, if you had the first position on Google, but you had 0 reviews, and the second position on Google had 30 reviews, that second listing is likely going to have a higher click-through rate than the first listing over time. So you would likely see an increase over time as a result. But yeah, the number of reviews after a certain point, though, like we don't tend to see that same pattern. But it is a good idea to always have a comparable number of reviews in comparison to like competitors.
Emma, would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with everything Joy said as well. I think that reviews are just a strong signal to a search engine that just communicates your trustworthiness and authority. And I've seen that if the text of a review that's left for your company contains a search term, that will also pull into the local 3-pack results sometimes, which is kind of interesting.
And we have one final question for you, both Joy and Emma. So if you had one piece of advice for a digital marketer who's trying to get the most out of their Google listings, what would it be? Joy, let's start with you.
Yeah, so mine would be just to pay attention to how things display because it changes so frequently. Google shifts around how things look. So if you're just looking at like a rank tracker and you're not actually seeing the full picture, you could be missing out on things. So I strongly recommend, regularly Googling yourself and seeing how you show up, how your competitors show up, and looking for opportunities there.
And what about you, Emma?
Yep, that's pretty in line with what I was going to say as well. I'm fortunate to have a lot of good tools at my disposal, but I think at the end of the day, it's really important to view things through the eyes of your customer. So taking that time to see how it's looking to your customer is great use of your time.
So thank you both so much. At this point, we have about 10 minutes for questions. So I'm going to open it up for questions. You can submit your questions through the chat box on the right side of the screen. And please indicate who you would like to ask your question to. So Joy, it looks like we have one question for you. Joy, what is your opinion on adding a city office at the end of a business name? While it's technically against Google policy, does it help with ranking?
So it likely will help. It's one of those things, if you're running a chain, you're more likely to get caught. So if Google catches you, worst case scenario, they would suspend the account. Like that is the worst thing that could happen. So it's always good to keep that in mind if you're ever on the border of breaking guidelines. I mean, it is against the guidelines if you don't reflect that city name on all your official like signs and business cards and whatnot. But you likely would see a lift in ranking.
Another question for you, Joy, and I think I'm also going to ask this to Emma as well. What rank tracker do you utilize?
So we use 3. I feel like it's hard to narrow one down. So Places Scout is one that we use that more recently that is really cool because it's got a geo grid. So you can put a single keyword in and it will scan it from all these different points in your neighborhood or your city. And so you can actually see how you rank on like a map, which is really cool. In addition to that, we also use BrightLocal and Whitespark, and they're pretty similar. Whitespark has a really cool feature where they show you graphs over time that are very helpful to see trends, and you can break it down by like just the 3-pack or just organic, which is really helpful. And BrightLocal we've used for ages, and we have their tracker scanned daily so we can monitor algorithm updates and things like that.
And Emma?
Yeah, currently I use Moz the most often.
Great. Thank you both. Emma, I have a question for you. Is there any advantage to adding custom services to the category listings?
I would say yes. I do that quite frequently now. If a community has recently had upgrades, I use those services features to display what the new upgrades are. We also are in a unique position where we have a variety of apartment communities where some may be senior housing only. So in order to get more specific with the category, the apartment building, I'll use that area of the Google My Business listing to provide more clarity on what kind of apartment building it is.
Joy, back to you. Here is a question. Can you talk more about what Google Posts are?
Yeah, so it's a feature that is accessible to most business types. Like there's a couple that don't have it, like hotels do not have it, and I think regulated goods, so like an alcohol store or something of that nature. But it's basically I kind of think of like Twitter, sort of. Like it's a small post that goes up, that shows up on your knowledge panels. When someone searches for your business name, it's like a little message that shows up there that's kind of similar to like a Facebook post or a tweet that you can link to your website or have like a call to action on.
Thank you. I have another question for you both. So Google will often fill in business information by itself. Can I trust Google to fill in my information correctly? Joy?
No, no, never trust Google. No, I'm kidding. They do a good job at what they do, but I mean, anything that's automated, I wouldn't rely on that if it was my business. So, I mean, definitely monitor it.
Emma, would you agree?
Yeah, I completely agree. They'll get close, but not necessarily completely accurate. So definitely keep an eye on that.
Here is another question. With respect to uploading photos, does it matter if this happens at the individual location level or versus a central headquarters listing management location? Emma, I might direct this one to you.
Yeah, so we do both. For the most part, I prefer to do at a location level and just be as hyper local and specific as possible. But most recently this week, in light of all that's occurring, we're doing some things at a company level. So I think it kind of just depends on what the messaging is and what you're trying to say.
Joy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not sure if I understood the question, if they're talking about like the location of the person posting, if that matters. I don't believe that matters at all, but as far as like individual locations having different photos, and that's very important. I've seen some big restaurant chains who use the same photos across all of their locations, which I think really is not what a user's looking for. If they want to know, like, for example, what a local Starbucks looks like, they are wanting to see photos of that Starbucks, not like a Starbucks logo, for example.
And another question for Joy. Can you post Google Posts in bulk, or does it have to be location by location? And the example company used has 80 plus locations.
So currently the Google API blocks that, but there is a way around it. Don't ask me how they've gotten around it, but there is a company called DBA Platform that allows for posts on chains, and they've obviously figured out some way. So it is a paid for tool. It's not free, but as of the moment, there's no free way to do it that I'm aware of.
Okay. See if there are any other questions. I think that might be all for now. So we can, if no one else has any questions, we can end this webinar several minutes early. If we have not answered any of your questions, or if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out. You can contact me or anyone on the Binary Fountain team, and we will help you in any way that we can. So thank you so much again to Emma and Joy for providing their insights, and thanks to everyone for joining us. We will be sending this recording soon to all participants, and we hope to see you guys at our next webinar soon. I hope everybody has a great morning or afternoon, depending on where you are.